Welcome to Chris in the Garden.
Good morning.
Can you suggest a good, safe method of controlling fire ants?
As well as Argentine ants. Argentine ants are the little black ants that seem to be predominant. Red imported fire ants are very localized. You'll see big mounds with fire ants, and you don't want to mess with them because they will cause a bite with a pustule on your skin and very painful. But the Argentine ant go after the vegetables, and at this time of year, mid-July, as we get hotter and we get more humid, they're actually looking a lot for water. But what's a safe method would be diatomaceous earth, and it's got to be the food grade, and it's organic. It has the OMRI listing. Diatomaceous earth is a desiccant, and what that means is it dehydrates or dries up the ants, and when they walk through it, they get it stuck on them, and they basically dry up, and they are social insects. Ants are easily controlled with diatomaceous earth. You dust it. You could put it even on your patios and around the house even. It'll dry up all sorts of insects, even fleas and their eggs and their larvae. One thing you want to be careful, it is silica. You don't want to breathe it, so it's very fine particulates, and you want to make sure that you wear a dust mask when handling it. The diatomaceous earth that we sell, we have a food grade 50-pound bag, and we have smaller ones like a 10-pounder, a 4-pounder. They come with a little duster, and you minimize contact with it if you put it into a duster and dust it away from you. And diatomaceous earth is actually beneficial for the soil, so it's kind of a win-win. It helps with soil structure.
Do you sell cedar chips? I heard it's a good insect repellent, and I have tons of ants outside and many inside.
I could refer to a cedar chest where you keep your finer clothes and wool blankets, and kind of repels all sorts of insects. They don't like cedar. So 2 cubic foot bags, I can describe it as reddish brown, kind of shards, maybe this long, furry. It weaves together and it stays put, and it does repel insects. And it does provide a mulch which will conserve moisture. Eventually it does break down, helping the soil becoming humus, which are small little carbon chains, which benefits the soil. The microbes end up eating it. So yes, very good product.
Do you carry beneficial nematodes?
We carry 3 types of beneficial nematodes. They're kind of specific for different soil inhabiting insects. So you can stop grubs, flea larvae, and root knot nematodes. So good nematodes can kill off the bad nematodes. It's like a little sponge that you get. You put it in clean water, preferably not chlorinated. Let it sit for 24 hours, and the chlorine usually evaporates out of the water. But put in a bucket of water and squeeze the sponge several times like this into the bucket of water, and you'll end up with an invisible slurry, but you would transfer the bucket into a clean hose sprayer, and it covers about 2,000 square feet. Nematode is a very small organism that has a chitinous exoskeleton, almost worm-like, microscopic, very small. And there are good ones and there are bad ones, and the bad ones cause knots and roots. We call those root knot nematodes. And we have good nematodes to kill those guys.
I would like to know if you sell live redworms or any variety of garden worms.
We do. We call them red wigglers. We keep our beneficial insects, including the nematodes, and ladybugs, praying mantises, decollate snails, as well as the red wigglers, all in a little insect refrigerator we have on site here at our store. So you get about 300 worms in a package. They could be varying in size from tiny little ones to bigger, more mature ones, to even eggs. You could release them anytime as long as the soil is moist. They want to also have some mulch, because they'll come up and grab the mulch and bring it down. They're tillers of the soil, so to speak, in a natural way, and they produce excellent byproduct from what they eat. We call them worm castings, which is a nice way of saying excrement from the word. It doesn't smell. In fact, you can mix stinky fertilizers with worm castings. The worm castings actually neutralize the odor. There's probiotic bacteria in the worm casting itself, and there's all kinds of trace elements. So it's a great way of building soil up. I have a terracotta pot next to my fruit trees. In the terracotta pot, I drilled several holes on the sides, and there's a big hole already in the bottom, and I bury these things about 95% down into the ground with the open side up. I also purchased the terracotta saucer. I invert it and I put it on top as a lid. I drilled holes in the top, very small holes, just for air and breathing. I'll start with a base of core, which is coconut fiber. Then I'll put the worms on top of the core, and they want to live in it. They don't eat it, they just habitate in it. And then on top of that, that's when I'll start putting in kitchen waste, such as, greens, carrot tops, things like that,
Right
eggshells.
on top of the worms.
Right on top of the worms. You could even put in cardboard. You could put in junk mail. You could put in eggshells. Fruit that drops on the ground that's overripe, I throw it in there, and they do all the work. So what they'll do is they'll go in and out of those holes, and they'll come up and eat all this material that I give them. Then they're going to run around and go in all sorts of directions towards the fruit trees, and they're bringing the worm castings all over the place. So they do all the work. All I have to do is fill up the thing, usually about once a week, but they've multiplied.
And that'll work for a raised bed area as well, right?
Yeah, raised beds are fine, and native soil into the ground. As long as the soil's moist and you have mulch on top of it, they'll be happy. But when you have a problem with worms is when the soil gets hot and dry, they'll just go somewhere else. They'll pack their bags.
I know it's the end of growing season for tomatoes, but for the last few weeks, I got a big infestation of tomato worms. Any suggestions on what to rototill into the ground so that next year I don't get worms?
You can't really stop them by treating the soil. When it comes to the hornworm, which are large green ones that seem to be camouflaged and the same color as the tomato plant and the leaves, very hard to find sometimes, but they are...
Do they have horns?
Towards the rear end of it has a single horn that sticks up like that. They are from a moth that comes in at nighttime. And these moths, they're called a sphinx moth, the largest moth in our area actually. And they'll come by and lay eggs on tomatoes, and these guys hatch and grow very quickly. So that moth egg will hatch into a larva, and that larva is a tiny little hornworm, but before just a couple weeks it can get 3 to 4 inches long. And they eat not only the tomatoes themselves, but they'll eat the stems, the leaves. They're very damaging. You can dust with BT, BT meaning Bacillus thuringiensis. BT comes in a liquid form as well as a dust. And BT, being a bacteria, and that's OMRI listed, the advantage with BT, it has residual on the leaves. So when you get it on the surfaces of the leaves and the stems, it will stay several days. And any worm that comes by and decides to start snacking on the tomato plant will die from the BT.
So just keep them dusted year-round?
Yes, and there are year-round tomatoes.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you for watching our video at Orange County Farm Supply.